once I get more clarity, once I've understood my audience better, once I've been doing this for a little bit longer, then I'll take my podcast seriously. If you've ever thought this, especially after you've launched your podcast, then this one is for you. Because what I see over and over again isn't podcasters that are too early. It's podcasters that are recording and publishing, but they're still telling themselves that they're in the figure it out stage. And here's what people won't say out loud. Clarity doesn't come from more time or experience. It comes from making decisions. In this episode, I'm going to walk you through why clarity is one of the most convincing ways podcasters stay stuck, and what actually happens when direction is never chosen early. Most podcasters don't grow because they don't have a strategy. No more. Welcome to the show, Podcast to Grow, where I help coaches and entrepreneurs turn their podcast into their most powerful business tool. I'm Elena, and I'm breaking down exactly how to get more listeners, more impact, and more sales. Let's get into it. There's an idea floating around in the podcasting space, and it sounds responsible, even mature, and strategic. And it sounds a little something like this. Once I've been podcasting for long enough, I'll know what my podcast is supposed to do for me. But here's what I've learned from watching dozens of podcasters do this. Time doesn't create more clarity. It just fills up the space you give it. If your podcast doesn't have a clear role in your business, time won't reveal one. It will just create more content, more effort, more attention to something that is still not doing what you had hoped it would do. This is where a lot of podcasters get confused. They think they're too early, but what is really happening is that their podcast was never given something specific to do. So it becomes practice, even exploration, or just a thing that they do on the side. And when a podcast stays in that lane long enough, it doesn't evolve, it stalls. Not because a host isn't capable, not because they didn't wait long enough, but because clarity isn't something that arrives on its own. It's something that you choose early and you build towards it. Here's what I want to name, because a lot of podcasters get stuck right here. When you believe that clarity comes with time and experience, you give time permission to lead you. And when you give a podcast time, it usually turns into one of these three things. It becomes something that you're exploring, something that you're practicing, or something that will make sense eventually. And none of that is wrong, but none of that creates direction. What time actually gives you is repetition. So you get better at recording and being more comfortable on the mic and super attached to your show. But the bigger question is never answered. What is your podcast here to do? I've worked with podcasters who have been early for 2 years. They have hundreds of episodes, but they're still saying things like, I'm just figuring it out. I'm waiting to see what episodes really resonate with my audience. I don't want to box myself in yet. At that point, it's not that it's too early. It's that it's undecided. And undecided podcasts don't evolve. They orbit. I've seen this play out in two different ways. One podcaster waited. She waited to see if there was more data that she could gather, more feedback, more proof before deciding what the podcast was actually here to do for her business. So she kept on recording, publishing, showing up for her show, but never asking her podcast to do anything specific. And a year later, she had consistency. She had content, but she also had exhaustion and burnout. But what she definitely didn't have was clearer direction of what she was doing before she even started. Another podcaster I worked with launched her podcast before her offer was fully formed and basically, ready for the people. But instead of waiting for clarity, she chose decision. She said, this podcast is here to explore this idea from this angle for this type of person. That decision didn't box her in. It gave her something to test and try out. The mic didn't magically clarify something for her. The decision did. The podcast became a place where she could pressure test the direction, not avoid it. And that's the difference between these two. If this episode is hitting home for you today, I want to leave you with one single question to ask yourself. Not something to answer right now, but something to notice. Ask yourself, what have I been waiting to feel clear about? Instead of choosing direction and letting clarity build from there. Not what can I talk about forever, but what is my podcast here to support right now? Because clarity doesn't come from having the perfect answer. It comes from committing to direction and adjusting as you learn. Here is what I really want you to walk away with today. You don't earn clarity by waiting long enough, and you don't earn a strategic podcast by waiting out the early phase. A podcast becomes powerful when it is given a role, when it's not just content consistency or something that you're doing right now, but something that is intentionally connected to where you are going. Time doesn't create the connection, decisions do. So if you're listening to this episode and you're realizing that you're calling this phase early for you, when really you've been avoiding making that decision of what your podcast is supposed to do and what role it is supposed to have in your business. And that awareness matters. That's the work. If you've enjoyed the show, come hang with me on my list. That's where I share deeper strategies, behind the scenes stories, and even access to everything I'm working on. No fluff, just what's working for podcasts right now. Head to the link in the show notes to join the email fam.